dirty, because most of the stuff that we are doing or that we are going to do is just super easy, and the most time that you are spending is basically by just trying around and testing different things that you can do. So the first thing that we are going to add is a UV sphere, a icosphere, whatever you want. I'll just go for a UV sphere, that's fine, just how it is, just leave it as that and just shade it smooth, and that's it. So then next we can add a plane and just move it up a little bit by, oops, on the z-axis by 3 meters or something like that, that's fine. You can take it up a little bit higher if you want. You can scale it by 2 so that it's twice as big, and then you have everything that you need to create a cloth simulation like that. So this needs to be our collider, so we are going to the physics properties down there into collision, and then just click on that, leave it as it is, that's fine. Then go back to the plane and go for cloth just right below the collision properties to create the cloth, and that will also create a collision for you. You don't have to do anything more. Then you can set your desired cloth settings in the cloth presets, or just in the settings down there in the tab below. I just went for something like rubber, for example. That's pretty basic, and that already does the things that I want. So right now, if I press play, this is happening. And what is this? This is nothing. That is not cloth, that is just a rubbery plane, and that's it. Why is that? Just because, of course, we don't have any geometry to work with. We just have, if we go into edit mode, these 4 edges, these 4 vertices and corners, and that's it. So what we are going to do is to create a subdivision surface modifier and drag it before the cloth. Then just set both levels, or levels viewport can be lower, that's okay, but remember you have to bake your simulation so that it works. So I just set both of these to 5, that is alright. And now you notice that it's going to be pretty much rounded. And to fix that, I'll just go into edit mode, select all of that, press Shift E, and then just drag until you reach the corners, which will just set the mean crease. And you can also just set it to 1 right there in the transform properties. That's alright as well. I did that as well. So this is something that we can work with right now. That is just looking a lot better already. Not quite as nice as in the video that I did, in the animation that I did, but it is alright. And we can shade it smooth, and it looks a little bit nicer. It's still quite jagged and just has these edges all over the place. And as you might be able to see, it is also just colliding with itself. To fix that, we are going to be going back into the physics properties for this one. Scroll down to collisions, open the collisions tab down there, and then just toggle the self collisions so that it will collide with itself. If you are not happy with the distance of collisions, then you can lower these values, because if you don't, you might just have a gap between, for example, as you can see a little bit here, then you just have a gap between the object and your cloth. But in my case, that was fine. I didn't change anything about this. I just left it where it was. And if I just do it again, it will no longer collide with itself, or intersect with itself, basically. So that is quite nice already. Then it's, as I said, still a little bit too low poly for me, so I added another subdivision modifier behind or below the cloth. So this one can still be set to 1 in the viewport level, that is alright. For the render, I set this one to 3. And also in the advanced options just below there, use creases, I just turned that off, so that you will not be able to see the corners anymore. They will be just rounded. So the difference is this and this. And that is all I did for the modifier stack. So now it looks already quite a bit better than before. It's just really uniform. It looks the same from all 4 sides. If that's something you want, that is of course alright, you can do that. But for me that wasn't really the case, so To make it less uniform, I just decided to rotate this and off-center it a little bit, and that is already doing a lot. So if I go into front view, you can see it is now falling down not uniformly and just hanging over on one side more than on the others, and then it is also just falling down. That is nice, but maybe not really what we want. So yeah, just to get around that, add a force field, and that is a wind force field. You can place it somewhere, it doesn't really matter because it's just everywhere in the scene. Right now it does pretty much nothing because it's far too low. The power is just far too low, the strength is not working. So for example, on frame 40 I set a keyframe on the strength by pressing I above the input, and then maybe 20 frames later set it to 5000 and put in another keyframe. And if you just simulate this again, it should be, yeah, getting blown up by the wind, which is the case, but it's still not really looking how I want it. So I'll just do 6500 and press I for another keyframe. That is also pretty funky, but not really what I want. This is still really random. So I just go back to 0 and to frame 60. Set this to 8500. And maybe now it is working. If it's still not working like I want, it's still really weird looking, I can move these keyframes 10 frames forward so that the wind is starting earlier. That's looking a little bit nice already. I think that's quite fine. Maybe 5 more frames and try this again. And as you can see, the thing about this is that it's just really fast at calculating these simulations. So it's actually fun to simulate something and not really just a lot of work to do until it's midnight and the next day and the next week and the next month. I'll just move it 5 more frames, and I think I will probably just leave it at that. That is all right. There we go. So, and to get rid of all the wind afterwards, I'll just copy the one from 40, Shift D, move it until 80, and then in frame 100, I'll just set the strength back to 0. So now it should fall down after a little bit of jiggling around. There we go, that is quite alright. And now we have our simulation done, basically. I can maybe set this to some higher value as well. Just set this to subdivision times 2, that it looks a little bit nicer. Okay, now we're done. Because I haven't saved the file and the cache, it will just reset and sometimes look really wonky if you just play around in the timeline down here. Some stuff like that might happen. Yeah, because just the cache bake is not up to date and it's not replayable. So I'll just go and save it. So, and since I now have saved the file, I can go back to the plane and scroll down to cache. And then in the cache options, I can select the options if I want to. I can select the options to disk the cache, no, to cache the disk. No, that's wrong. You get what I mean, to have the cache on the disk. And that works now because you have saved your file, and you can also just calculate it. Calculate to frame. If you are at frame 120, it will just calculate until then and until there and not further. And then this is the actual cache. It will be actually baked and not just yeah, something that you can't replay. So it works now. Now it should be baked into the file rather than on the disk, but that's fine as well. So now we have something we can work with, and 120 frames should be fine. The thing is that it will, if I go further than 120, just remove it again. You can see it down here at the blue bar. If it just disappears, then that means your cache is not there anymore. To fix that, I can either set the end frame to 120 or bake the whole animation. I will just set this to 120 and just bake it again, and then it should be fine. And if I save the file, then it should work as intended. So this is fine. Now it is all done. I'll just save it, and we have our nice cache, and it should be replayable all the time now. Okay, that is looking good. What is not looking so good is our camera angle, and yeah, just the whole scene setup. It's just really weird and just really wrong and not so nice. So I'll just go into front mode and center the sphere. Press Control Alt and 0 so that my camera is fixed on this position, and then go into the dimensions. If I save this for Instagram, or just go for 1080 by 103050. That is the portrait format for your feed, for example. Right now you can also see that it's just simulating in frame, which is probably not the best start for the animation. So I'll just drag it up and go into the bake, delete the bake, and bake it again. It's just really quick, so it doesn't take up a lot of time. That's fine. Now it just starts out of the frame, which is too early. So that is something to keep in mind, maybe. The wind now needs to start later, and just move it back some frames, delete the bake it again, and then we should have something that should work, I hope. Yeah, there we go. That is almost fine. Now we need a little bit more. Okay, now we should be fine. This is okay. I'll just save it again. Something like this. I could also just zoom in a little bit so that we don't have so much junk and empty area around there. So something like this, filling out 1/3 of the width. Okay. And yeah, of course, don't forget to save in between. Now we have everything for the simulation. If you want, you can add more obstacles. You can rotate it like that and try out some funky stuff so that you have some more interesting visualizations for your cloth. But I'll just leave it at that. The next thing will be our shading. I'll go into the shading tab, turn on scene lights and scene word, and now it just looks horrible and really gray. There's nothing in there. Let me just drag out the timeline a little bit. Select the sphere, use a new material, set it to something you would like, maybe a light teal or something. And then for the other one, I'll just use my general material, go for something darker, like I did in my scene. This does not really look like much right now because we have no light, so I'll just add a light setup really quick click. So we have an empty, we have an area lamp, rotate it around the cursor just like this, go into the properties and set it to rectangle, make it a little bit taller and smaller, and also brighter, 500s for example. Copy, rotate, something like that. So we have twice the power, twice the fun. We just set some light to light blue as well, and the other one to a little bit more strength, something like this. And now I will just give this a little bit more metallic and maybe play around with the roughness. No, this is fine, I guess. And just go into render view to see what I'm doing, and I'm rendering in cycles. I think I'll just give it a little bit more metallic and a little bit less roughness, something like this. I didn't do that before, but that's fine. You can do whatever you want. And I'll leave the sphere to at 0.5 for everything. So this is fine, this is nice. Go back into look dev maybe, and now we can also add a background. I'll just drag out a new window here. So, and if I have this selected and the node wrangler enabled, I can just press Ctrl T to add this horrible setup without an environment texture. That's all right. Go for color ramp in here, separate XYZ and connect this, connect the Z output to the vector and the color to the color. Now it's just going black to white. I'll just set this to a really dark greenish tint, maybe something that I'll take out of the scene. E to eye drop and then select the color you want. and for the other one as well, the eye drop, something like this, the scale to 0.1 so that it's smoother, and just rotate it around the y-axis, I guess. I think I want it even smoother, so I'll just set it to ease maybe. Not sure if that's working so nicely. Rotate it around X now. Yeah, that's kind of right. This is just for the lighting, the general lighting, because I will just render it out transparent anyways. It doesn't really make that much of a difference, but you can see if I turn this color into white, it will just be really white just because it reflects the environment. So I'll set it to something that is close to the colors that I want in the end. That is fine. And yeah, I'll just render it transparent. To do that, go to the just general render properties, film, and then to transparent, and just enable that. So now you can just transparently render this out. I'll just set the end to 120 frames. So now we have something like this. This is already looking quite fine. That is nice. Now, how do we render it out? How do I do it? Or how did I do something like this, where this sphere is first there and then it just disappears suddenly, and then there's no sphere and it's still a collider object? How did I do that? That is quite simple. There's basically two different but really similar ways. I'll just show you one really quickly. You can, for each object under the object properties in the visibility tab, just set it to holdout. And holdout, what that means is if the object is in front of some other objects, it will just not render these pixels. It will calculate shadows and stuff like that, but it just will not render the object if the object would be visible in the viewport. So you could do that once for the sphere and once for the plane. I will just not do that. I'll select the sphere, press M, new collection, sphere, same for the plane. Okay, so M, new collection, cloth maybe if you will prefer that. Okay. Now we have this collection here in the outliner. That is quite nice. If you don't see all these options here behind all the objects, then you should turn these on in the filters. In the filter options, there's the restriction toggles at the top, and then you can just see all of these. I'll just go to the view layer, just right at the top, just in the right corner, set this one or give this one the name sphere. Then just go into the cloth and turn on this holdout, this little, yeah, I don't know, sphere with a glare or something like that. Just turn this on. Now only the sphere will be visible. Now I can create a copy or a new one, and then just call this one cloth as well. Just go into sphere and do the same for this one. Holdout. Now we have two separate render layers. That is what we want. I'll just save it again before we do anything. Any rendering, it might always crash, so before you render, always do that. I'll go into compositing, turn on use nodes, and then copy this render layers thing, place it here. As you can see, there's this drop down where we can select sphere and cloth, and I'll just do this once for sphere at the top, one for cloth at the bottom. And now still nothing is happening. If we press F12 once and render this, you can see it'll just render the sphere first and then the cloth. That is fine. Just now it will, if it's finished, it will be going back to the sphere, just because this is connected to the output, to the composite output. I can shift control, click both of these, the node wrangler enabled, to use these in the viewer so that I can see, and I can switch between both of these. So what do we do with these now? I'll add a file output node, place it down there as well, go into the node options properties, add an input, call one cloth as well, one sphere, and then we can choose a path. I'll just use this and call it cloth sim01 as I did before. So this is our path, which will be just the same in the same direction directory as our save for the blend file. And now we have sphere and cloth, and I could just add some hashtags behind that, underscore hashtag hashtag hashtag, so that will be a placeholder for the frame number. I'll just leave this as PNG RGB A so that we have the transparency, and then set color depth to 8, that is fine. Then connect the sphere to the sphere input and the cloth to the cloth input. And now if we render this, it will automatically, even if we don't animate this, only if we render this, it will just put these in our folder where we just have the files. So right now, if I am going into rendering, then you can see in my directory, I have this folder automatically, and it just created these 2 files because I rendered frame 84. This is exactly what we want. I'll just cancel it because I don't want to save this. Go into compositing again, and I think I'm done. Yeah, this is fine. So we are done here. We are done with the shading if we're happy with everything. So right now we can just go and render this, and it will just do both of these renders, the sphere and the cloth at once, basically. So we can see the sphere first and then the cloth after, because there is no cloth so far. It's just not really interesting to see. With the setup that I'm using, it's going quite fine and quite alright in speed. If you have a slower PC, it might be also good if you are rendering only the sphere, to use the render border with Ctrl B to drag a rectangle just around your sphere, so that it renders only the sphere part, only like that, and everything around will be ignored just because it's going to be transparent anyways. So why render that data if you don't need it? Something like that. So I think we should just be about to see the cloth coming in, hopefully in the next few frames, and then I'll just time lapse this, or yeah, just cut off to the next part where we are done, and then how we can composite this in After Effects, how I did that. We can also do this in Blender, of course. If you know how to composite, I think you don't really need to do that or need to know that, because it's quite straightforward, I would say. So for the first frames, this is just really uninspiring and not so interesting, because there's just nothing happening. Now you can see our cloth coming in, and it's just super fast for each frame. It's just taking 5 seconds with denoising, stuff like that. Alright, this is looking fine, and if you're rendering it in a stable version of Blender, it will also crash a lot less than in Blender 3.0 Alpha. So this is the file that I had before for the other scene. It is quite simple in general. There's not really much that you have to do. I'll just create a new project really quick, and I'll just pick or create a composition from footage. Just choose this folder that I have, go to frame 0, select it, and use the PNG sequence option, import. Now it will be imported, and it will have a black background. That is alright. Then we press Ctrl I and do the same for the sphere. Select one, make sure it's a PNG sequence, and put it in here. Then which one you put on top and which one you put below should be absolutely that should make no difference at all, because yeah, they are just the opposite of each other basically. So this is what we have now, and I'll just create a new shape layer, new shape layer, so that we can create a rectangle. And if I double click the rectangle tool, it will just create a rectangle that is full size, just because I have it from yesterday, it's still having the same fill. And if it's not a gradient fill, then you can just click here in the fill option. And if you are clicking control fill, then it will switch between the different options. And now then you can see there's a gradient between these 2 points. I don't know why it creates that like this, but you can drag them like you want, for example like this. Now the shape layer is in front of everything. That is not really what we wanted, so I'll just drag it below. And now it looks like this. That is already quite fine. What I will also do is create another layer, a new layer, and an adjustment layer, or also Control Alt Y. Then search in effects and presets for profile converter. Input profile would be P3, as I usually do, and the output profile as RGB, or my working profile, the working space, for example. What it does is just create more saturation in the colors. If this is too much, if you don't want it at all, that's fine. If it's too much, then I can just lower the opacity of the whole layer by pressing T and setting it to maybe 25%, for example. I think that's what I did for the other one. So this is nice. If it's also too dark, you can add levels, stuff like that, of course. Same as you would do in Photoshop or something like that. Maybe like that, gamma to there we go. 0.95, so it looks like this, a little bit more contrast, a little bit lighter, and a little bit more saturation, something like this. So I compare these two. I think because I turned it into a metallic material, it is quite dark now, and I think I like the other one more, but that is all right. I also did not use denoising, as I just noticed. I didn't really change the settings there, but this is just for the compositing that we are going to do, and that's fine. So this is what we have. Now what we can do, of course, is pick a scene, or maybe I'll just, well, the first thing, go into composition settings, and instead of the duration of 4 seconds, I'll just set it to maybe 12, maybe 16 seconds. I think 12 should be fine. Now we have a lot more space. I'll just drag out the adjustment layer and the background layer to the end. And now I can just, if I play this animation, pick a frame where the sphere is not visible anymore, up this layer by holding, or by pressing Ctrl Shift D. That will just separate it in this spot, and now I can just remove it. Basically I can just drag it out. So if I play this, there will be no sphere afterwards, so it will just be gone, something like this. And then I could also copy this one, Ctrl D, drag it out, place this one here, and now if we just align them like this, this will mean that it will take one cycle of this invisible sphere, and then afterwards, voila, it will be there again, stuff like that. And I'll just copy both of these again. Oh, that was 3 layers, not 2. And what I did for the other one is just let me just drag this back to normal. That should make sense. That should be working fine. And yeah, it loops. That is fine. That is quite alright. And what I did for the other one, for example, is just to take the cloth layer and just go to time reverse layer, or Control Alt R. I think that's the normal shortcut for that. So it means it will be reversed. It will just play in reverse. And yeah, of course, this also means that it will be looking different than the other one, and that can have a nice effect. In this case, I think it doesn't look that cool, because yeah, we just have a different kind of cloth simulation, which is not working as nicely as the other one. But in general, you can try that, and if it looks fine to you, then you can use it, of course. So now you have something that is just really weird and wonky, and I don't know, something that might just confuse the viewer, like this. Or you can just, of course, do that for the other layer as well. So now it falls down, and then it will just fall back up into the sky, come down again, and then it just loops like this. This also works, of course. So this is basically your final result. This is basically everything that we need to do, and then you can just render it out like you would normally do. And of course, this works also in Blender's compositor. You can use that one as well. There's nothing keeping you from doing that. The only thing that you might check out is for the background. I think you can already, or you will be already be able to see that in the video, is bending or these lines from the gradient. That happens a lot in simple gradients like this, where the colors are really close to each other. And something to a little bit kind of a workaround for that is to apply some turbulent displace on the background gradient layer and set the amount to something really high so that you can see the size. And the size in this case, I was working with 4 or 5, something like that should work, so that you can barely see the difference if you're just looking at it. But I'm not really sure if this will be visible on YouTube anyway, so you just have to try it for yourself. It will just displace the colors a little bit, and that might just help you with the general output and with the color bending. And if the amount is too high, for example, if I set this to 900, it will be just really high. Something like 250 or maybe 350 or something like that should be working fine. It of course depends on your size, but if you're working with the same size, then it should work. And now you have something that you can render out and that you should be able to put on Instagram or social media, on the web, anywhere, without having to struggle with just harsh lines in your background color or gradient. So yeah, that's basically it for this video. That is basically everything that you need to know. Thanks for watching. I hope this helped, and I hope to see you in the next one. I hope to see what you are creating with this. So if you have something, you can share it with me. You can share and tag me wherever you like, wherever you can find my social media. Instagram, for example, it's basically Mr. Glissy everywhere. So just feel free to tag me, just feel free to show it to me, and yeah, I'm happy to see that, happy to know what you think about it and what you would like to see next. Goodbye.